The foundation brush trembled against my cheekbone as I layered on the third coat, watching the purple-black bruise disappear beneath beige concealer, like a secret buried under snow. My bathroom mirror had become a confessional where I performed this ritual of erasure every morning, transforming evidence into absence with the practiced efficiency of someone who'd learned that survival meant invisibility. The cut on my lower lip was trickier. Cosmetics could only do so much when the wound was fresh, when it pulled and stung with each movement. Cade's class ring had caught the tender skin there 3 nights ago, and the metallic taste of blood still seemed to linger in my mouth like a reminder of all the words I should have said but swallowed instead. I fastened the high collar of my work uniform, the stiff fabric hiding the constellation of fingerprint bruises that circled my throat. The bruises were fading to yellow-green now, easier to conceal, but I'd learned long ago that easier didn't mean safe. My reflection stared back at me with eyes that had mastered the art of looking without seeing, of existing without drawing attention. By the time the bus wound through Greenwich's Belhaven Peninsula, my composure was securely in place. But the moment Blackwood Estate came into view, I knew something had shifted. Lights blazed in previously shuttered windows. The circular drive was filled with vehicles. Staff members I'd never seen moved with purpose through the entrance. Lord Drayson-Voss had returned. Mrs. Chenoweth intercepted me at the service entrance, her usual composure edged with tension. Thessaly. Good timing. Lord Voss requires his private study prepared. Full cleaning, fresh linens, the Waterford decanter set. He'll be working there this afternoon. My pulse quickened. I'd cleaned the study monthly during his absence, but never while he was present, never with the possibility of direct encounter. The study was exactly as I'd left it, yet somehow different, as if the space itself knew its master had returned. I worked methodically, fighting the protest of cracked ribs with each stretch and reach. I was dusting the crown molding when I heard footsteps in the corridor. Measured, deliberate. The sound of expensive shoes approaching with the inevitability of a countdown. The door opened. Lord Drayson-Voss entered with the silent grace of something that had never needed to announce its presence to command a room. He was taller than I'd realized, easily 6'3", with aristocratic bearing that spoke of generations of authority. His suit was impeccably tailored, charcoal gray that made his pale complexion seem almost luminous. But it was his eyes that arrested me, pale gray, almost silver, with an intensity that made my carefully constructed invisibility feel like a paper shield. You must be Thessaly Wren. His voice was cultured, with an accent I couldn't place, European but ancient. He knew my name. Yes, sir. Lord Voss. I lower my arms carefully, fighting the wince. I'm just finishing. I can return later if... No need. He moved further into the room, and I instinctively stepped back. Something flickered in his expression, recognition of my retreat. Mrs. Chenoweth speaks highly of your work. She mentioned you were away last week. I trust everything is resolved. Yes, sir. Family matter. All taken care of. The lie came automatically. His head tilted slightly, and I had the sudden, irrational sensation of being studied by something that saw in spectrums beyond human perception. I built everything I have on a singular ability, he said quietly, moving to the window. I see what people hide. I read the truths they bury beneath carefully constructed facades. The temperature seemed to drop. Your invisibility, Miss Wren, was an impressive performance. But performances end when the audience is no longer fooled. His pale eyes found mine. You may go, but know that while you're under this roof, you are seen. I fled, my pulse racing with a single understanding. Everything had changed. Mrs. Chenoweth found me in the hall outside the study, my hands still trembling from the encounter. Lord Voss has requested afternoon refreshments at 3 o'clock. You'll serve, he specifically asked for you. The words landed like stones in my stomach. In 2 years, I'd never been specifically requested for anything. I'd been interchangeable, forgettable, exactly as I needed to be. At 2:58, I balanced the silver tray with practiced care, imported tea, thin porcelain cups that cost more than my monthly rent, a selection of pastries from the French bakery in Greenwich proper. My ribs ached with each breath, the binding I'd wrapped around my torso that morning doing little to ease the deep, grinding pain where Cade's boot had connected. I knocked softly on the study door. Enter. Drayson was seated at his desk, focused on documents spread before him. Afternoon light slanted through the windows, but somehow failed to reach where he sat, as if shadow pooled around him independent of natural law. Your tea, Lord Voss. My voice was steady. Another small victory. On the side table, please. The side table sat beneath a high shelf lined with leather-bound volumes. I set the tray down carefully, then reached up to straighten a book that had been pulled slightly forward, an automatic gesture born from 2 years of maintaining perfect order. The movement pulled my torso in exactly the wrong way. Pain detonated through my chest like lightning, so sharp and consuming that the gasp tore from my throat before I could stop it. The room tilted. My knees buckled. The tray clattered as I stumbled backward, hand pressed to my side where the agony bloomed white-hot and blinding. Then there were hands on my arms, steadying me. I hadn't heard him move, hadn't seen him cross the room. But Drayson was there, his grip firm and his hands cold, cold as marble, cold as something that had never known warmth. The touch was so shockingly frigid that I flinched instinctively, and in that moment of recoil, I saw something flash in his pale eyes. Something ancient and dangerous and absolutely predatory. Out. His voice cut across the room, and I realized with distant surprise that another staff member had appeared at the door, drawn by the noise. All of you, close the door. No interruptions. The door clicked shut with terrible finality. Drayson released my arms, but didn't step back. We stood close enough that I could see my reflection in his eyes, small, pale, cornered. Sit down, Thessaly. Not a request. The authority was absolute, the kind of command that had probably toppled kingdoms in whatever previous century had shaped him. I sank into the nearest chair, still pressing my hand against my ribs. Show me. His voice had changed, dropped to something quiet and terrible in its gentleness. I'm fine. I just moved too quickly. I can hear your heartbeat accelerate when you lie, Thessaly. He crouched before me, bringing those silver eyes level with mine. And I can smell blood beneath cosmetics. Copper and fear, and something older that you've been trying to hide for longer than just today. My throat closed. The carefully constructed walls I'd built began to crack. Show me, he repeated. Please. That last word undid me. Not the command, but the request. With shaking hands, I unbuttoned the top of my uniform, loosened the collar, revealed the yellowing fingerprints around my throat. Then, moving as if in a dream, I pulled up the hem of my shirt to show the binding wrapped around my ribs, and beneath it, the massive purple-black bruise that spread across my left side like a continent of pain. Drayson's expression didn't change. Not a flicker, not a movement. But the temperature in the room dropped 10 degrees, my breath suddenly visible in the air between us. When he finally spoke, his voice was softer than a whisper and harder than stone. Tell me his name. Cade Torrance. The name felt like broken glass in my mouth. Drayson stood, his movements fluid and precise. You're going home. Mrs. Chenoweth will arrange transportation. You'll receive full pay for the week. He moved to his desk, wrote something on a card with that expensive fountain pen. If he contacts you, if he approaches you, you'll call this number immediately. Do you understand? I nodded, numb, clutching the card like a talisman. Good. Go now, Thessaly. And do not return to work until you hear from me. The car service dropped me at my apartment building at 4:30. I climbed the stairs to my studio with mounting dread, expecting to find Cade waiting, angry that I was home early, suspicious about why. But the apartment was empty, His usual detritus scattered across surfaces, empty bottles, discarded clothes, the particular chaos of someone who'd never learned to clean up after himself. I stood in the center of the room, the card Drayson had given me still clutched in my hand, and tried to understand what had just happened. The knock came at 7:15. My heart seized, but when I checked the peephole, it wasn't Cade. A man in a dark suit stood in the hallway, his bearing military precise, his expression professionally neutral. "Miss Wren? I'm Madigan Hale, Lord Voss's personal driver. May I come in?" I opened the door with trembling hands. Madigan stepped inside, his gaze sweeping the apartment with a trained assessment of someone who'd seen worse, but expected better. "I'm here to relocate you to the Blackwood guest house. For your safety, please pack essentials, clothing, toiletries, anything of personal value. We leave in 20 minutes. I can't just leave. Cade will come looking for me. Hill. Cade Torrance will never touch you again." Madigan's voice was flat, final. Lord Voss has seen to it personally. The way he said it, the absolute certainty, the careful neutrality, made my blood run cold. What does that mean? What did he do? "Pack, Miss Wren. We're on a schedule." I threw clothes into a duffel bag with shaking hands, grabbed my laptop, the few photographs I had of my family before everything fell apart. Madigan stood by the door, patient and immovable as a sentinel. The drive to Greenwich passed in silence. Madigan didn't offer explanations, and I couldn't form the questions that were screaming in my head. The guest house sat at the edge of Blackwood's property, a 2-story cottage that looked like it had been transplanted from the Cotswolds. Inside, it was more luxurious than anywhere I'd ever stayed. Hardwood floors, a fireplace with a marble mantel, furniture that belonged in magazines. "Dr. Sharma will be here within the hour to examine your injuries," Madigan said, setting my bag inside the door. "Kitchen is stocked. Lord Voss's private number is programmed into the house phone. Security is active. No one enters this property without clearance." "Madigan, please. What happened to Cade?" Something flickered in his expression, not quite sympathy, but recognition. "There are things we don't speak of, Miss Wren. Not because they didn't happen, but because speaking of them serves no purpose." He moved toward the door. "Lord Voss protects what's his. You're under his protection now. That's all you need to know." The door closed with a soft click. Dr. Sharma arrived 40 minutes later, a woman in her 50s with gentle hands and knowing eyes. She examined my ribs, my throat, the older bruises I'd almost forgotten about. She asked no questions about how I'd gotten them, only what hurt and for how long. "Cracked, not broken," she said finally. "You're lucky. Rest, ice, the medication, I'm leaving. No heavy lifting for 3 weeks." After she left, I stood in the pristine kitchen of a guest house worth more than I'd earn in 5 years and tried to understand what I'd stepped into. Cade's phone went straight to voicemail. His social media had gone dark. And no one at Blackwood would meet my eyes when I asked what had happened. They knew. All of them knew. And their silence was more terrifying than any answer could have been. On the 3rd night, I heard footsteps on the guest house path. Not Madigan's military precision or Dr. Sharma's purposeful stride. These were measured, deliberate, the sound of someone who had all the time in the world and knew it. I opened the door before he could knock. Drayson stood on the threshold in dark slacks and a white shirt, sleeves rolled to his forearms. Somehow the casual attire made him more unsettling, not less, as if he were playing at normalcy and the performance didn't quite fit. "May I come in, Thessaly?" I stepped aside. He entered with that uncanny grace, his presence filling the space in a way that had nothing to do with physical size. "I want answers." My voice was steadier than I felt. "About Cade. About why you're doing this. About everything." He moved to the window overlooking Blackwood's gardens, backlit by moonlight that seemed reluctant to touch him. "What would you like to know?" "What did you do to him?" I removed a threat. "That's not an answer." He turned to face me, and in the dim light, His eyes caught the moon like a cat's, reflecting silver. Cade Torrance no longer exists. His body will never be found. His associates will assume he fled deaths or ran afoul of someone more dangerous than himself. In 6 months, he'll be a missing persons case that goes cold. In a year, he'll be forgotten by everyone except you. The casual certainty of it stole my breath. You killed him. Yes. No hesitation. No remorse. Just flat acknowledgement. Why? The word came out broken. Why would you do that for someone like me? Because I could. He moved closer, and I caught that faint antiseptic scent again, like old churches and preserved things. Because men who brutalize women weaker than themselves are parasites, and I have always taken a particular pleasure in eliminating parasites. You can't just kill people. I've been killing people for over 400 years, Thessaly. His voice was quiet, almost gentle. I am not human. I haven't been human since the winter of 1607, when something old and hungry found me dying in a Prague alley and offered me a choice I was too young and too arrogant to refuse. The room seemed to tilt. That's impossible. Is it? He smiled, and I saw his teeth, perfectly normal except for the canines, just slightly too sharp, too long. I am a vampire. I own Blackwood Estate and 17 other properties across 4 continents. I control business interests worth billions, but money is merely a tool. What I actually control are territories, accords, the delicate balance between my kind and yours. I enforce rules that keep the predators from becoming too visible and the prey from realizing they're being hunted. I backed away until my spine hit the wall. This is insane. Cade was a threat to something under my protection. So, I eliminated him. I've eliminated threats before, competitors, traitors, those who break the accords. I am very, very good at elimination. Horror crawled up my throat, but beneath it was something worse. Something that shamed me. Relief. You're a monster, I whispered. Yes. He didn't flinch from the word. But so was he, in his own mundane way. The difference is that I have rules, consequences, a structure that governs my monstrosity. He had only appetite. And I'm supposed to just accept this? Accept what you are, what you've done. Drayson tilted his head, studying me with that unsettling intensity. I have built empires on reading what people hide, Thessaly. Do you know what I see when I look at you? I shook my head, unable to speak. A woman who once believed she deserved more than survival, who studied art history and dreamed of museums and beautiful things, who laughed without calculating the cost. You hide her beneath bruises and fear and the conviction that wanting anything beyond endurance is dangerous. He took a step closer. I would very much like to meet her again. Tears burned my eyes. She doesn't exist anymore. She does. She opened the door tonight demanding answers instead of cowering in grateful silence. His pale eyes held mine. The question is whether you'll let her stay dead, or give her permission to live. Drayson moved to the sofa, settling with a kind of preternatural stillness that made me realize I'd never actually seen him fidget, never caught him in any of the small, unconscious movements that marked someone as living. I didn't come here merely to confess my nature. I came with an offer. I remained against the wall, needing the solid support behind me. What kind of offer? A position. Not as housekeeper. Your talents are wasted on dusting and polishing. He gestured to the chair opposite him, an invitation. When I didn't move, he continued. I need someone to manage my household, my calendar, my human-facing affairs. Someone intelligent enough to handle complexity, discreet enough to keep confidences, and perceptive enough to navigate the spaces between what's said and what's meant. You're offering me a job. The absurdity of it almost made me laugh. I'm offering you a life. His pale eyes caught the lamplight. The position comes with an apartment in the main house, the entire 3rd floor east wing, actually. For rooms, private bath, a view of the gardens. The salary is $200,000 annually, plus benefits, plus discretionary funds for anything the position requires. The number hit me like a physical blow. 200,000. I made 32,000 as a housekeeper. I couldn't finish the sentence. Fair compensation for managing the affairs of someone whose existence spans centuries and whose business interests require constant attention. He leaned forward slightly. I am offering you security, Thessaly. Financial independence. A place where your competence is valued and your presence is wanted. And a promise. What promise? You will never be hurt again. Not by anyone. Not while you are under my protection. The words were soft, but they carried the weight of absolute certainty. No one will raise a hand to you. No one will make you small. No one will take from you what you don't freely offer. I felt tears sliding down my cheeks before I realized I was crying. Why me? Because you deserve better than what you've been given. Because I see who you could be if fear wasn't the lens through which you viewed every moment. He stood, graceful and unhurried. Because in 2 years of employment, you never once asked for special treatment, never exploited your position, never gave me reason to question your integrity. That kind of character is rare. I value rare things. The temptation was overwhelming. To say yes immediately. To grab this lifeline with both hands and never let go. The terror of my own eagerness made my voice shake. I need time to think about this. About all of it. Of course. Drayson moved toward the door, then paused. You have a week to decide. Stay here, rest, let Dr. Sharma continue your treatment. The guest house is yours regardless of your choice. And if I say no, then I'll arrange for you to relocate anywhere you choose. New city, new identity if you prefer, enough money to start fresh. You'll never see me again. He opened the door, silhouetted against the night. But understand something, Thessaly. You're already safer than you've been in 5 years. Kate is gone. His threat is eliminated. The question isn't whether you're protected. You are and will continue to be. The question is whether you want to keep merely surviving or start living. He left, pulling the door closed with a soft click. I sank to the floor, back against the wall, and let myself shake. $200,000. An apartment in a mansion. Protection from a creature who'd lived 4 centuries and accumulated the kind of power that made men like Cade simply disappear. And all I had to do was choose it. Choose to stop hiding. Choose to believe I deserved more than endurance. Choose to trust a monster who saw me more clearly than any human ever had. I sat there until dawn, watching moonlight track across the hardwood floors, and tried to remember who I'd been before fear became my identity. The first night I slept without waking, I didn't realize it until morning light filtered through the guest house windows, and I found myself still in the same position I'd fallen asleep in, relaxed, peaceful, my body no longer programmed to jolt awake at every sound. No footsteps in the hallway. No key turning in a lock. No bracing for whatever mood would come through the door. Just silence. Just safety. Just sleep. I lay there for a long moment, feeling the absence of fear like a physical presence, and realized I couldn't remember the last time I'd woken without dread already tightening my chest. The week unfolded like a dream I was afraid to examine too closely. Dr. Sharma visited daily, monitoring the healing of my ribs, pleased with my progress. Mrs. Chenoweth sent meals from the main house. Real food, prepared by Blackwood chef, arriving on covered trays that made my cramped apartment dinners of ramen and toast seem like artifacts from someone else's life. I ate without my stomach clenching, without calculating how much each bite cost, without wondering if eating too much would trigger comments about my weight or waist. On the 3rd day, Madigan found me on the guest house porch, staring at Blackwood's gardens with a book in my lap, one I'd borrowed from the library after he'd mentioned I was welcome to explore the main house. Lord Voss asked me to tell you the library is fully accessible, he said, his military bearing softened slightly by something that might have been approval. He thought you might appreciate the art history section. Second floor, west wing, the cases near the windows. I found it that afternoon. An entire wall devoted to art history, volumes on the Renaissance, Baroque architecture, Dutch masters, contemporary movements. Books I'd dreamed of owning when I was 22 and still believed I'd finish my degree. I pulled down a massive tome on Caravaggio and settled into a leather chair that probably cost more than my car. I was still there 2 hours later when Drayson appeared in the doorway. Finding everything you need? His voice held quiet amusement. I startled, nearly dropping the book. I'm sorry, I didn't mean to. Thessaly. He moved into the library with that uncanny grace. This is not a probationary period where you must prove your worthiness. The resources here are available to you. Use them. That evening, Madigan said something dry about the estate's temperamental furnace, and I laughed, a real, unguarded sound that surprised us both. He paused, a slight smile crossing his usually neutral expression. It's good to hear that, Miss Wren. I realized I couldn't remember the last time I'd laughed. Months? Longer? The bruises faded from purple to yellow to nothing. My ribs stopped protesting every breath. I moved through the estate without calculating which movements might trigger pain, without making myself small. On the 6th night, Drayson invited me to dinner. Not in the guest house, in Blackwood's formal dining room, a space I'd cleaned but never imagined occupying. The table could seat 20, but only 2 places were set, close enough for conversation but not uncomfortably intimate. He'd arranged for the chef to prepare everything without garlic. The consideration struck me as both thoughtful and surreal. Tell me about before, he said as the first course was served. Before Cade. Before you learned to make yourself invisible.
So I did.
Haltingly at first, then with increasing ease. I told him about studying art history at UConn, about the semester abroad program I'd had to abandon when my mother got sick, about loving museums and beautiful things, and the way light worked in Vermeer paintings. He listened like my words mattered, asked questions that proved he was genuinely interested, not just performing courtesy. Shared observations about artists he'd actually known, had commissioned, had watched work. Caravaggio was impossible, he said with something like fondness. Brilliant and violent and utterly incapable of not making enemies. I met him once in Rome. He tried to stab me in an argument about perspective. I laughed, then caught myself. Did he actually stab you?
He tried.
The blade broke. Drayson's smile was brief, but genuine. I've found that most things that try to hurt me ultimately fail. As I walked back to the guest house that night, something in my chest felt different. Lighter. Like something that had been closed too long was finally beginning to open. Tomorrow I had to give him my answer. Tonight, I let myself imagine what choosing this life might actually mean. The call came at 8 in the morning on the 8th day. Madigan's voice clipped and professional. Lord Voss requests your presence in his study. Immediately. The word immediately carried weight I'd learned to recognize. This wasn't a social call. I found Drayson standing by his desk, a tablet in hand, his expression darker than I'd ever seen it. Even the light seemed to avoid him, pooling in corners instead of touching his silhouette. Sit down, Thessaly. I sat, fear coiling in my stomach like something living. He set the tablet on the desk, turned it to face me. On the screen was a photograph, surveillance footage from what looked like my old apartment building. A man I didn't recognize stood in the hallway, testing my door handle. His name is Varric Slade, Drayson said quietly. He runs narcotics distribution, illegal gambling, and trafficking operations across Fairfield County. Mid-level criminal with delusions of empire and enough connections to make him dangerous despite his lack of sophistication. My mouth went dry. Why are you showing me this? Because he's looking for you. Has been for the past 4 days. Drayson pulled up another image. A different man, this one photographed outside the Stamford bus station. Varric believes Cade hid something valuable before he died. Money, product, information. I'm not certain which, and neither is he. But he's convinced you know where it is. I don't know anything. Cade never told me about his business. I believe you. Varric doesn't. He advanced through several more images. Men watching my apartment, asking questions at the diner where I used to get breakfast, showing my photograph to bus drivers. I've intercepted 2 direct attempts to locate you. The first was through employment records my security team flagged and redirected the inquiry. The second was more concerning. He pulled up a final image. A bounty listing on what looked like a dark web forum. My name, my photograph, and a 5-figure reward for information leading to my current location. The room tilted. Oh God. Varric is human, but well-connected and reckless. He has access to resources and people who ask fewer questions than they should. Drayson's voice was measured, but I heard the edge beneath it. Controlled fury. You are no longer safe outside these walls. Even here, precautions must multiply. The bubble of peace I'd been living in for the past week shattered like glass. This is because of Cade, I whispered. Because of what you did. This is because of what Cade was. Drayson moved around the desk, crouching before my chair so his pale eyes were level with mine. You didn't create this situation. Cade's association with Varric predates you by years. The danger existed whether I eliminated him or not. The only difference is that now you have protection. Protection that makes me a prisoner. Protection that keeps you alive. His tone sharpened. Make no mistake, Thessaly, if Varric's people find you, they will take you. They will hurt you until you tell them something, anything, even if it's a lie. And when they realize you truly don't know what they're looking for, they won't simply let you go. Tears burned my eyes. So what do I do? Hide here forever? Never leave? Never have a life outside these walls? You make a choice. He stood, moving back to the window where shadows welcomed him like old friends. The offer I made stands. Accept the position, accept my protection fully, and I will handle Varric the same way I handled Cade.
Permanently.
Decisively. Or I arrange for you to disappear. New city, new identity, resources to build a different life somewhere Varric will never find you. Those aren't choices. They're just different cages. Yes, he said quietly. But one cage keeps you close to something that might become more than survival. The other is simply exile with better furniture. I stared at the surveillance images on the tablet, at the strangers searching for me because of a man I'd tried to love and a life I'd tried to escape. This wasn't temporary sanctuary anymore. This was reality, shaped by consequences of violence I'd never asked for. And the only question left was which cage I'd choose to live in. I spent the rest of that day in the guest house, staring at walls and trying to understand how my life had narrowed to 2 impossible choices. By evening, I couldn't bear the silence anymore. I walked to the main house and found Drayson in the library, reading by lamplight that seemed to bend around him rather than illuminate. He looked up as I entered. You have questions. I need to understand what I'm actually choosing. I stayed near the doorway, needing the escape route even as I moved toward him. If I stay, if I accept, what does that really mean? Drayson closed his book with deliberate care. Sit. I'll tell you everything. I took the chair across from him, and he began. If you stay, I will eliminate Varric Slade within a month. Quietly, thoroughly, in a way that causes his organization to fracture and his associates to forget you ever existed. His voice was matter-of-fact, discussing murder like a business transaction. You will live in the main house, manage my affairs, and accompany me to events that require a human presence. You will be compensated generously and protected absolutely. And the cost? The cost is that you will see things. Know things. Be complicit in a world that operates by rules most humans never glimpse. He leaned forward, firelight catching in his pale eyes. I feed, Thessaly. Not often, once every few weeks. from willing donors who are compensated and cared for. But I am what I am, and proximity to me means accepting that reality. My stomach twisted, but I didn't look away. There are accords between my kind, he continued. Territories, hierarchies, ancient agreements that maintain the balance. I enforce those accords in the northeastern territories. Sometimes enforcement is political. Sometimes it's violent. If you stay, you will know when I eliminate threats. You will understand what I am capable of. And if your enemies realize I matter to you? Something dangerous flickered across his expression. Then you become a target. A vulnerability. Other vampires would use you against me if they understood what you represent. What do I represent? I don't know yet. His honesty was somehow more terrifying than any lie. But I do know that I notice when you're not in a room. That I've rearranged my schedule to dine with you. That the thought of Varric's people touching you triggered a rage I haven't felt in decades. He stood, moving to the window with that preternatural grace. I am offering you a cage, Thessaly. A beautiful, safe cage with everything you could want except true freedom. But a cage nonetheless. I need you to choose it with open eyes. The words came out before I could stop them. I'm falling in love with you. Drayson turned, surprise breaking through his usual control. And I don't know if it's real. I continued, my voice shaking. Or if it's just trauma and gratitude. If I'm confusing safety with affection because you're the first person in years who's protected me instead of hurt me. I don't know how to trust my own feelings anymore. He crossed the room in 3 silent strides, stopping close enough that I had to tilt my head back to meet his eyes. When you know the difference, he said softly, tell me. Until then, I will keep you safe regardless of what you feel or don't feel. Your protection is not contingent on your affection, Thessaly. It never was. Then why offer me all this? Why not just eliminate Varric and let me go? Because you deserve more than survival. His hand lifted, hesitated, then gently tucked a strand of hair behind my ear. His fingers were cold, but the gesture was achingly tender. And because I am 400 years old and have forgotten what it feels like to want someone's presence rather than simply their blood. You remind me of something I thought I'd lost. What? Hope that monsters can be more than their hunger. I made my choice that night, standing in Blackwood's library with a vampire who saw me more clearly than any human ever had. I chose the cage, but I chose it with open eyes. 3 weeks later, Varric Slade's empire collapsed in a single night. The news reported it as a coordinated law enforcement operation, simultaneous raids across Fairfield County, arrests of key associates, seizure of assets. The business sections mentioned that several of Slade's legitimate holdings had been acquired by Moretti Industries, a subsidiary of Voss International. Varric himself was listed as missing, last seen leaving a warehouse in Bridgeport. I was having breakfast in my new apartment when Madigan delivered the morning papers. He set them on the table without comment, but his expression held something that might have been approval. I didn't ask for details. I was learning which questions had answers I didn't truly want. The East Wing apartment had become mine in ways the guest house never had. I'd arranged my books on the shelves, hung the few photographs I owned, claimed the space as somewhere I belonged rather than somewhere I was hiding. The view from my window showed Blackwood's gardens transitioning into autumn, leaves turning gold and crimson in the slanting light. I'd been managing Drayson's affairs for 2 weeks now, and the work came more naturally than I'd expected. Coordinating his calendar, handling correspondence, interfacing with business partners who never questioned why Lord Voss's personal liaison conducted most meetings while he remained carefully out of direct sunlight. I was good at reading between lines, at understanding what people needed versus what they said, at navigating the spaces where human business intersected with darker territories. Mrs. Chenoweth had stopped calling me by my first name with that careful condescension and started seeking my input on household decisions. The staff treated me with respect that had nothing to do with fear and everything to do with competence. I was becoming someone I'd forgotten I could be. That evening, Drayson found me in the library. Our library now. The space where we'd shared dinners and conversations and comfortable silences. I was cataloging a new acquisition, a Renaissance manuscript on artistic techniques that had somehow survived 4 centuries. Thusly, he settled into his usual chair, his movements carrying that eternal grace. Have you made your determination? I didn't need to ask what he meant. The question had been hanging between us for weeks. I set down the manuscript and met his pale eyes. I choose this. Not because you saved me from Cade, though you did. Not because you eliminated Varric, though I'm grateful you did. I took a breath. I choose this because you saw me when I'd made myself invisible. Because you're the first person in years to ask what I want instead of simply taking. Because when I'm with you, I remember who I was before fear became my identity. Something shifted in his expression. Surprise, perhaps, or hope, or that rare vulnerability he showed so carefully. And the other question? His voice was quiet. Gratitude or something real? It's real. The certainty surprised me. I don't know what love looks like with someone who's lived 400 years. I don't know if what I feel is what you need or want. But it's real. It's mine. And it's not trauma speaking anymore. Drayson stood, crossed the space between us with that inhuman speed, and took my hands in his. His fingers were cold, always cold, but his grip was gentle. Then I will spend the considerable time I have left ensuring you never regret being seen, he said. I will protect what we're building here. I will value your presence not as a possession, but as a gift freely given. And I will try very hard not to let my nature destroy something precious. Your nature isn't separate from you, I said, surprised by my own conviction. It's part of what you are. And what you are is someone who sees people, really sees them, and chooses protection over predation. That's not despite being a monster. That's a choice you make every day. His smile was brief but genuine. You are far wiser than I was at 32. Than I was at 132, for that matter. That night, I stood in Blackwood's library at twilight, watching darkness pool in corners and spread across the gardens like a living thing. Drayson appeared beside me, silent as always, his presence no longer startling, but somehow essential. Are you afraid? He asked quietly. I considered the question. Thought about Cade and Varric and all the ways my life could have ended if not for the monster standing beside me. Thought about the darkness I'd chosen, the secrets I now kept, the world I'd agreed to navigate. No, I said finally. I'm not afraid anymore. For the first time in years, perhaps for the first time ever, I belonged somewhere. Not despite the darkness, but within it. Not as someone rescued, but as someone chosen. Not surviving, but living. And that was its own kind of salvation.